Murdoch dangerously in debt with creditors. Fortunately, 145 banks decided to give him more time. However, one bank in Pittsburgh refused and threatened to call in a $10 million loan. The way he had sort of set up this covenant of banks is that if one demanded the loan, then all of the loans came due. There was a desperate 11th hour call from Murdoch to the bank in Pittsburgh that brought his company back from the brink of collapse. That was this incredible accomplishment in which he managed to save the company. He had to sell off parts of it, had to sell the magazines, and had to commit himself to better business practices. The banks have told him he has to behave himself. He had to restructure nearly $8 billion in debt. It was a near-death experience for his company, and a defining moment for Murdoch. He was dealing with Rupert before this, and now it's much more structured. Still, in 1993, he was back at the poker table. He forked over $1 billion for the Chinese television network Star TV. Porter Bibb is an American media analyst and publisher.
Rupert Murdoch first entered China through Star, the satellite television network that he built in Hong Kong, and he had in the early 90s broad and wide access to what was essentially a closed media market for the rest of Western broadcasters.
But on September 1st, 1993, he squandered it. Murdoch made a speech in London that inflamed the Chinese government.
Advances in the technology of telecommunications have proved an unambiguous threat to totalitarian regimes everywhere.
The Chinese retaliated by banning private ownership of satellite dishes, and with them, Murdoch's access to millions of Chinese homes. Star TV was under siege. Murdoch had to placate the Chinese government, so he removed from Star a frequent source of their anger, the BBC. He also killed an unflattering book about China written by the former governor of Hong Kong. Chinese leadership soon after expressed admiration for the gestures, and Murdoch would continue from then on to court Chinese officials to expand News Corp's often tense presence in China. China is the new world. It is the future. And he sees this earlier and more dramatically than most people. But almost nothing works out in China. His competitor becomes the Chinese government, and he can't compete with the Chinese government. Rupert Murdoch is not much of a sports fan. Even so, in December of 1993, he took aim at an American obsession, football, and he scored. With a breathtaking bid of over $1.5 billion, he snatched the rights to NFC games from CBS and stunned the wide world of sports.
I don't think we've ever done a deal where we haven't woken up the next morning with buyer's remorse. And I think in a way that's good because it spurs you to work even harder.
For the NFL, it could have been a major fumble.
I think the NFL was very brave. It was a gutsy call on their part because Fox had nothing. It didn't have a sports division. So in reality, John Madden's great joke was, we should legalize on Fox Sports, where Fox Sport, singular. They took a huge risk. It was like, what were they going to do if we screwed it up? What would have happened if our pregame show was a shambles, that the set fell apart, and then when we start covering it, we're missing touchdowns, we haven't got this, the announcers are wrong.
And what if he couldn't reach all the Americans who loved football? Murdoch didn't blink. To get more eyeballs, he invested another $500 million in New World Communications, owned by the savvy investor Ronald Perelman. Perelman then switched the affiliation of 12 of his prime major market television stations to Fox. It was the biggest realignment of affiliates in U.S. broadcast history, and a bonanza for the local stations. The NFL on Fox generates over $900 million a year and has a weekly audience of up to 20 million viewers. Murdoch was on a roll, but the high roller wanted to get back to his roots.
He's found himself in the television business, which he doesn't like. I don't think the man has ever watched a full hour of
besides, of course, the news business. By the mid-1990s, Rupert Murdoch had his sights set on buying the only 24-hour cable news network, CNN. But its owner, Ted Turner, was contemptuous of Murdoch's politics and pretensions, and the feeling was mutual.
I need to call Rupert Murdoch.
Turner eventually and reluctantly sold CNN, but not to Murdoch. In 1996, the cable news channel went to Time Warner as part of a $7.5 billion merger with Turner Broadcasting. Murdoch had to come up with another approach. He never flinched and created his own channel to go head-to-head with CNN.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Britt Hume. There was
Fox News quickly established itself as a bully pulpit for conservative views.
Part of the business plan is you shouldn't compete with CNN. You should go for an audience that is underserved, and you should do it in a way that's cheaper than having to send reporters around the world. So we just have opinionists, and that's what works. It works incredibly well.
To run it, he hired Roger Ailes, a former consultant to conservative politicians and Republican presidents from Richard Nixon to George Bush.
Rupert, by his nature, is a little conservative, not as conservative perhaps as Roger Ailes is. But what he liked was the fact that Roger had a plan for Fox News. Fox News, in its early days, lost a lot of money. Rupert actually had to pay cable companies to take it.
It was lively, controversial, and drove liberals crazy.
You're taking a cheap little pathetic shot. I'm telling you that that's... You're taking a cheap little pathetic shot. Americans, and indeed our foreign allies, who actively work against our military once the war is underway, will be considered enemies of the state by me.
With a slogan of fair and balanced, former president and COO of News Corp, Peter Chernin, insists that Fox News makes a distinction between the news of the day and its talk shows.
There's news on Fox News, which I happen to believe is actually, very neutral and moderate and presented fairly. And then there's talk and opinion shows, which no one ever pretends are news or factual. And Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity are clearly people on the right side of the spectrum, but they've always been presented as such.
The Fox News channel has soared past CNN to become the dominant and most profitable cable news network in the United States, with 2010 revenues of $1.5 billion. But turmoil was brewing in Murdoch's personal life. He divorced his wife Anna after 32 years in 1999. It was one of the largest divorce settlements in history. And 68-year-old Murdoch immediately married 30-year-old Wendy Dung, a graduate of the Yale School of Management and former vice president of Star TV. Murdoch's personal life appeared recharged, but less than a year later, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
But he perseveres through this, and in fact goes on to have one child and then another child. So at the age of 70, he has his daughter Grace, and then at 72 has his daughter Chloe.
In 2003, at age 72, Rupert Murdoch went after yet another glorious television prize, DirecTV.
He had wanted a satellite business in the United States for a decade. He dealt with the board of General Motors for close to 2 years to get a deal done. They eventually sold to Rupert grudgingly, and he finally won DirecTV.
His $6.6 billion offer gave him a 34% stake. But in a bizarre series of events only 1 year later, Murdoch had to give it up. While celebrating the returns of George Bush's election in 2004, Murdoch overlooked that a huge block of his company's News Corp stock shares came on the market in Australia. American media mogul John Malone, not surprisingly, was paying attention and snatched them up when they were transferred to the U.S. market.
Rupert woke up one morning and said, "Holy cow, this guy owns 16% of my company. He could be dangerous," because he understands that John Malone is a really smart businessman.
Malone's stake in News Corp was now the second largest after Murdoch's. To get that chunk of his company back, Rupert had to part with something of substantial value.
to get rid of John Malone. In the end, he basically had to swap that stake for direct television. I think he might have wanted to hang on to direct television. It's become a really, really strong operator in television, and Rupert doesn't have a national distribution outlet. He probably would have liked that.
After reclaiming his stock, Murdoch moved on with a 2005 purchase of the social networking site MySpace. Once again, he moved swiftly and paid a huge price to beat out a rival, this time Viacom's Sumner Redstone.
Rupert's experience with the internet is a comic one, perhaps from his point of view, a tragic comic one. MySpace, which was, he bought for, I think, somewhat more than $500 million. At one point, they thought it was worth $25 billion, and it's worth scrap now. Rupert doesn't use a computer, doesn't get email, can't really ever get his cell phone to work. This is not his medium.
The effort was considered a disaster. Facebook left MySpace in the dust. Before long, Murdoch returned to his natural element, refocusing his eyes on one of the most prestigious and treasured newspapers in the world. Sarah Ellison is the author of War at the Wall Street Journal and was a former reporter for the paper.
When I talk to people about Murdoch and his lust for the Wall Street Journal, even his children said they couldn't remember a time when he wasn't talking about the newspaper.
The Wall Street Journal and its parent company, Dow Jones, were owned by the Bancrofts, a prominent